Lend me your ears.
This nation will rise up.
Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Welcome, Nick here, and today's episode number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can't believe it, 6 already. In such a short space of time, and each time I feel such a strong connection with the guest, and the messaging is so clear, and I'm just thrilled at the way this project is going and developing. And I just want to shout out to all the guys that have been on in all the episodes so far, and the guys that are coming, because I'm so excited to move this forward and build momentum. And thank you to the listeners. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate all your feedback that you've been giving me. So keep that coming, keep subscribing. So episode 6, what have we got in store for you? I'm really excited about this episode, as I am with all my guests, but this is akin to mine, and I think most people's hearts, because we are going to go into deep dive into nutrition. We are joined by a very special lady by the name of Kristy Coleman. She is a mother. She was living the corporate life in London as a legal eagle, and she just felt she had more to give in the health space, and has jumped ship and got deep into nutrition, and now she serves and helps people to overcome all sorts of different nutritional problems and gut problems and things that are really at the core of so many people's lives nowadays. And we're going to talk around all sorts of bits and pieces to do with food, the gut, health in general. Enjoy the show. Kristy Coleman, thank you very much for joining me today. Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. And we've heard a little bit about Kristy, so we're going to dive straight in with kind of your background story and what led you into what you're doing now, really, and the kind of why of what's your driver and passion behind nutrition, and why you think that's important in your life and the people's lives who you're trying to help, and kind of where you've come from. Because I know you've had another career, and you've had a journey, and that now you're a mum, and now you're trying to sort of incorporate nutrition into every part of other people's lives, and trying to develop your own business in that space. So
yeah, I mean, it could be quite a long answer, but I'll keep it short. So I grew up with a very sporty family. My brother's a boxer. My mum's always home-cooked food, really important. We've always enjoyed cooking together, so it's always been part of my DNA, I guess. It's been around me. Mm-hmm. So I trained as a solicitor, going back about 10 years now, and loved it, really enjoyed it. Was in intellectual property law, so looking at kind of trademarks, copyright, and also a bit of food law. So that's where I started getting a bit more interested in what's on the back of a label, what can people say, health claims. And I found it really staggering that people could make lots of different claims about food, having kind of health healing properties and things like that. So I got a bit more interested in that. My brother's career was getting kind of off the ground, being more kind of prominent boxer. And I was doing a lot of training, but at the same time working really long hours. I was probably training too much, not eating enough, not paying attention to eating well, or what I thought was well. Having just a coffee in the morning and a salad at lunch isn't really enough. And I got really tired. I didn't get sick, but I just stopped feeling like me. I was training for the marathon, and again, nutrition is so important there. And I just started thinking, is this it? I want to do a bit more. I was a bit confused with what was in the headlines, what was on social media. I didn't know what nutrition to follow. I was kind of doing CrossFit. I was like, should I be paleo? Should I not be? And I just generally felt a bit fuzzy about what to do with food, when really I'd grown up with kind of proper, wholesome food, real back to basics, cooking from scratch, minimal processed foods. And that's kind of my philosophy, really. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to look into different courses and decided to retrain as a nutritional therapist. So I did that over 3 years while working, which was fun. And then got pregnant. Again, another life-changing event. Nutrition is really important. And I set up my business just over 2 years ago, after the birth of my first son. So that was a great start into kind of new mum journey, starting a business, which is harder work than a child, I think.
Yeah.
And just really want to kind of get rid of the myths around a lot of people's food misconceptions.
Yeah.
Try and educate the masses, not just be in the London bubble that we find ourselves in, and try and help people navigate the way through nutrition and understand it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
So,
cool.
Me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that was a real nutshell description. Okay, so let's kind of unpick that a little bit. So you're in the corporate world, and I know myself that kind of the sort of corporate solicitor, the hours are just crazy, aren't they? Insane.
Yes.
Like I think of all the industries in the city, there's probably the longest hours I'm aware of that people work, reading all into the night at crazy hours.
Just I remember one night kind of finishing at 4:00 in the morning and getting a taxi home and then being in the office at 9, and I just thought that's not sustainable.
No.
And then going, I can go to the gym at lunch, it's fine.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So what was your kind of what were the key decision points around deciding to leave that industry and go into nutrition as a professional? Were there any key points, or was it a gentle transition? What made you think no, this isn't what I want to do now, that I want to move into nutrition full time?
I really wanted to help others understand a bit more about nutrition. I'd done quite a bit of reading. I was by no means an expert, and I was at work. I was working at Harrods at the time as their in-house lawyer, doing a lot of their food law stuff as well, which was really interesting. And I just thought, I can't see this being me for the rest of my life. I want to help people. And yes, I helped people a lot with law, but I was often the no-sayer. And I wanted to change that. And that's when I decided to just retrain, just going to start my new career.
Yeah.
So I just went ahead and did it.
Well, I'm akin to that process, having changed careers a couple of times and got out of the corporate world into clinical practice and now sort of coaching and podcasting and other sort of interests. So yeah, I think there's a natural. How long you were 10 years you were
10 years working in the legal world, which was great, and don't get me wrong, I loved it, met some wonderful people. But my passion, when something is just nagging you, you've got to go and pursue it. Yeah. And so I thought it's either now or never. So I made the jump, and I'm really pleased I did.
And being in the corporate world, and then also thinking about a family, was that a trigger for thinking, well, I can't work till 3 a.m, 5 nights a week, and then also have a family? Was that a factor?
Yeah, a little bit actually. I was still quite a way off thinking about having a family then, but I did think about how I wanted more control over my life. And when you're in that corporate environment, you have no control. Yeah. Your evening plans get cancelled without you having a say in it. And I wanted to kind of regain that control as well as pursue something I loved. Yeah. But yeah, so definitely a family. I don't see how it would be sustainable now, even though when you've got your own business, as you know, you're always on. But you can kind of dictate when you switch off. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think that was my driver for not staying in the military. Really, is having control or perceived control. I think if you work for any employer, you feel restricted, especially if at the drop of a hat your hours can suddenly be extended and you can end up working ridiculous amounts. But it is different doing your own thing, even though you might put in the same number of hours. It is a really different mindset, isn't it, to doing your own thing? Totally. Yes, I want to before we move on to kind of like the nutritional bits and pieces and the specific sort of systems and tools that you apply to your practice now, and the kind of information that you give out and the way you try and help people. I'm just intrigued by what you said about the brand bits that you've been doing and the food packaging and what people can put on the labels. And so what do we need to know about that? What is going on in that space that's sort of confusing or not quite what people might expect? Yeah, so you've got two things. First of all, you've got the digital world, the fact that there'll be products that are advertised through influencers, through kind of high profile names, through celebrities, and the claims they make around those products, and then you've got what's said on the products themselves. Now, it's really tightly regulated, but what we're getting a bit confused about is people kind of peddling magic cures like celery juice to cure everything on social media, and then kind of people going ahead and kind of doing that for weeks and weeks at a time and not really putting much else into their diets.
Yeah.
So that's where there's that kind of disparity that's happening. But it is a really interesting area, and one I've spent a long time researching when I was a lawyer. But it's something we need to kind of just bear in mind, just with baby packets as well. Like looking on the front of the packet, you don't have to list the ingredients in order. Look on the back, and you do. So it's just about educating, especially my clients, about what to look for.
Yeah.
Or even yogurts, for example. If a yogurt says it contains bacteria, is that bacteria live? If you look on the back, it says live cultures, then the cultures, the bacterial cultures have been added in afterwards rather than they're lost in the heat process.
Right. Yes, so that was a key learning point for me recently. Actually, I wasn't aware of that. So on the back, they're listed in order of the amount of that ingredient in the product, and that's So I didn't realise that until really recently, actually, that was how it had to be. And how does that different? Well, I'm not sure if you know, but how does that differ to what goes on in the States in terms of their food packaging?
So they've got slightly different laws to the UK.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to follow the European Union law as well.
For the moment,
yeah. I mean, how many days have we got left? Not too many. So they're quite different. They've got different controls, but they do have stamps of approval, if you like, so USDA organic, or it would say if it hasn't got pesticides in it, or animal hormones. So their milks are categorised in A, B and C, I believe, depending on what type of conditions that animal is raised in. So there is concern, obviously, with Brexit about the quality of the food coming in. But we've also got the red tractor stamp in the UK as well. So again, looking at signs of quality. And I always try and shop small. So get to know your supplier, get to know your butcher, your fishmonger, your grocer. Veg boxes are a great idea as well. Yeah. Just so you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
But yeah, always read the label. And sugar's not the enemy, but if it's the second ingredient on a packet or something, then maybe pick up something that's got a little bit less in.
No, it is interesting. I find it fascinating how the brands sort of look at doing things slightly differently to I would say exploit the rules, really. That's probably how to describe it, and really make the most out of the legislation to maximise their top line, really, I guess is what they're trying to do, like everyone who wants to be in business.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And I'm intrigued by the chat we had earlier today in reference to specifically to your dad, your father, having some sort of nutritional problems that led to his sort of ill health and that. So do you want to expand on that story and just tell that story? Because that's fascinating. It's so pertinent to what you're doing now, really.
Yeah, massively. So it was very new when I'd just qualified, and my dad had been suffering with a bit of a cloudy eye for some weeks. Didn't tell anyone. Very proud man. Didn't want to admit that he just had something in his eye. And then one day his eyesight had kind of almost gone, and he went to the doctor. Finally, obviously, something bad had happened, and the doctor diagnosed him with type 2 diabetes. And that was a real shock to him, because he was like, "Well, I don't eat food during the day. And I'm like, what about the 8 cups of coffee with the 2 sugars?" And then the huge meal you have at night with half a chunk of white bread with butter. Sorry, Dad. And he woke up to the fact that actually it was diet. It was a lifestyle disease that he had given himself, and we constantly joke about it now. But over the past 18 months, we've worked together, or I kind of trained my mum, if you like, with what to feed him, and he's reversed his diabetes. He's now off his medication, and a medication has a time and a place, and absolutely, really respect medication. But he's managed to change his diet in such a way that he no longer needs medication to manage his type 2 diabetes. He's always going to be at risk, but he knows now that he needs to have breakfast, he needs to have lunch, he can't live on coffee and sugar throughout the day, and he doesn't need that hunk of white bread every evening with a meal.
Yeah.
So It's amazing, the power of nutrition. And he didn't believe it. He wasn't disappointed when I changed career, but he was a bit confused, shall we say. But I think now he really understands that what I do can have a really meaningful output for someone, especially like himself, who thought nutrition was, just for hippies.
Yeah, I guess. I think it's difficult because as guys, we kind of don't want to sort of give up the mantle of like being sort of superhuman and the alpha and admit that we've got a problem and that sort of thing. So there tends to be a massive delay, and I find it a lot in my coaching practice. The guys that I speak to, they don't really understand the problem. No. That's really what always comes to the fore, and they sort of come to me because from a fitness perspective, because that's kind of like how I draw people in, because of my background more than anything else. And you dig and you dig and you dig, and they're like, oh yeah, I just want to lose a bit of fat, and then you dig and dig and dig and dig and dig, and that tends not to be the underlying issue. That's and I think that's a problem with the medicalisation of everything. That's we treat symptoms, so people come to you with their symptoms, and as the professional, you've got to really think hard, and the hard work comes in helping and coaching an individual to try and actually understand what the cause is. And was that the case with your dad?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a case of not admitting something was wrong, even though clearly his energy levels would have been flagging in the months beforehand. He would have had trouble sleeping. He was excessively thirsty. So all of those things were signposting towards type 2 diabetes. But the way our medical system tends to work is that you go to the doctor when something happens, when there's a problem, rather than looking at prevention. And my theory is always kind of looking at prevention rather than cure. And if he'd kind of maybe spoke up a little bit earlier, we would have caught it a bit sooner. But sometimes we often need something to happen to make that change. Yeah. And the same with clients I get in practice. So often with the male clients I see, they come in, like you say, wanting to lose a bit of weight, when really the underlying problem might be loss of libido, and they haven't got much energy, and they're really struggling with that. Yeah. And it's that unpicking and getting to know someone and realising it's a part of a bigger picture. Weight loss is often one that's kind of quite easily talked about, whereas the other things are less easy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And guys coming to me saying, I want to get fit.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, okay, what does that mean? And why suddenly now do you want to implement a change? It's interesting. And with I think it's about admitting a problem, isn't it, really? But that's what I was going to ask. So obviously I've got my own theories based on the stuff that I do, but what's your view in terms of identity, like the identity of versus the educational piece? So do you think what weight do you put to people not understanding what the correct or what the appropriate lifestyle choices are and decision making versus the identity that they have around eating certain things and associating with certain lifestyle choices?
Really interesting question. I would say it's very much equal, and the educational piece is huge, and that needs to start with children. Yeah. In schools early on, parents need to translate that down to children. They need to be role models. Not always that easy. Some children are just fussy eaters, and that's fine, they grow out of it. But schools as well, looking at school and education and not having a stigma around eating healthy. At the same time, we've got to have a balance. If someone wants to have some chips, fine, enjoy it. Don't feel bad and beat yourself up about it and then go for a 10k run to burn it off. Mm-hmm. That's where we had that unhealthy relationship with food. And then, like you say, someone's identity with food, everything is different for every single person. It's really, really individual. And that's what I work a lot on, is kind of getting people to understand what might work for someone down the road isn't necessarily going to work for you. Mm-hmm. So understanding that you need to find your own path and what works for you and what doesn't, and not to have these preconceived ideas based on what we've read in the media or in social media about what we should or shouldn't be doing. And I think that's where we need to find some kind of way of translating the science into something that's accessible for everyone to understand and access, and that's what we don't have at the moment.
Yeah, and that's kind of my mission with this podcast, really, is to try and cut through the noise, because there is so much noise, and that just creates confusion, and usually confusion leads to indecision or poor choices being made. And it's difficult because we put so much weight into the system and the science behind the system, and I think sometimes there becomes such a weight of knowledge, and that's a real thing, right? Weight of knowledge. It weighs us down, and people don't want to be weighed down by the knowledge and don't really want to wade through it all, and the key take homes are just obscured. And I think some of the marketing and some of the brands are happy to kind of pluck out the bits of information that they find beneficial to their brand and then shove that down people's throats, versus actually understanding what's appropriate and what's going to lead people in the right direction. It's a real dichotomy, because I think the science, there's some amazing studies going on at the moment, but it's about getting those ones to the fore as opposed to the ones that perhaps aren't really helping it, like it's a tricky, it's a really, everyone's, and it becomes so personal, doesn't it, your relationship with food as well. It's interesting. So, sorry, just touching back on your dad, I think that's just an incredibly powerful story, and I just want to acknowledge the work that you've done there in your own family to sort of turn things around. And how does that feel?
I can't take the credit. A lot of the credit goes to my mum, and just being quite a stickler with what he was eating. And then my dad for actually going, do you know what? I'm not just going to rely on taking a pill. I'm going to change my diet and lifestyle. So he got himself an exercise bike. Well, my brother and I got him one. And he does that. He does it every night, gets home from work, just 20 minutes. And that helps him manage his insulin. Which is incredible, that small changes like that are very achievable. He works long days on his feet. He can still come home, do 20 minutes on the bike, and then enjoy his dinner. He knows he's got to have breakfast. He knows he can't just put sugars in his coffee. And he does drink. He does drink alcohol, and he knows that he might feel worse the next day for it. So he's kind of learning at the age of 60 almost moderation, and that's something we're never too old to learn. And that often is what can be a simple change in people's lives to help them manage their relationship with food. Is moderation rather than restriction, taking things out, calling foods bad or good. It's all food. It's about how we perceive it. And that's something that I think my dad's done really well, is that he's able to balance his food a little bit more, and he recognises now the power of nutrition on his health and lifestyle. So I can't take the credit for it, but I've given them the knowledge, and they've taken it and they've run with it, and it's incredible to see.
It's a team effort by the sounds of it, for sure. So I just want to break it down for the listeners. So just really break it down to the basics of what was going on that led him to have the diabetes. So in your words, not mine. So in terms of what he was doing and how it was impacting him around, so he was effectively spiking his sugar levels, at puncturing his sugar levels up during the day, and that you describe it.
Absolutely. So whenever we eat anything, carbohydrates, whether that's from a piece of pasta or a croissant or some vegetables, our body breaks it down into some simple sugars called glucose. Glucose is then stored in the liver and in the muscles as glycogen, and then excess is stored as fat. Insulin helps us put that sugar into the cells. Now, we need that sugar for when we're doing some sport, when we're working, our brains need it for quick release energy. Now, when someone has type 2 diabetes, insulin stops working as effectively. So when you're eating sugar, you can't necessarily get it out of your blood as you would have otherwise been able to do. That happens if you're chronically overloading your body with sugar all the time. So my mum was buying, I think, kind of almost 2 pounds of sugar a week that he was having in his coffee, which is an awful lot of sugar that you're consuming over the course of a week. Like I said, sugar is not the enemy, but in excess, it's not helpful. So starting his day off with coffee, 2 sugars, followed half an hour later, coffee, another 2 sugars. Maybe at work, break time, 10 o'clock, coffee, 2 sugars. And that cycle continued throughout the day. So he didn't get hungry. He didn't understand why. He's also quite overweight. He didn't understand why he was overweight, because to him, he was having 1 meal a day. But what he was doing was constantly putting too much sugar into his body. His insulin couldn't manage it, and effectively that stopped working. Stress does the same thing. So he was also quite stressed at the time, running his own business, stressful. He doesn't need that much sleep, but I suspect maybe he wasn't getting enough. And then having that big meal in the evening, eating far more than he needed at the end of that day, because in his mind he hadn't eaten all day. And so psychologically I think he wanted to eat a lot more, so it was having the white bread with every meal. Now white bread isn't bad on its own, but it's about moderation. Again, you're having kind of 2 slices with every meal, plus potatoes, plus your meat, plus your sauce, plus your vegetables. That's too much sugar. At the end of the day, the vegetables and the bread breaks down into simple sugars. And if you're having too much sugar and your body can't deal with it, and you're consistently doing that over a long period of time, that's when you increase your risk of lifestyle diseases like type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, very, very well put. Very well put. And it's so important to understand the basics. It really is. And the way I think about it, when I'm trying to explain exactly the same, probably not as articulate as you, but the way I think about it is kind of just that you're stressing yourself, you're stressing your body at a cellular level by just ramping up the sugar. So you're having such a massive impact that those sugar spikes are having such a massive impact, and there's a kind of a hangover for that causes long-term damage. And with type 2 diabetes, there's always a lead-in, so people will have elevated sugar levels prior to any sort of diagnosis or any physical manifestation, so any problem occurring, any symptom, they'll always have that lead-in time where their sugar levels, and they'll just start to feel a little bit unwell, and then they'll start to do something about it, and then they'll get their diagnosis. And it's just for me, it's understanding that basic concept of you can't flood your system with sugar all the time, because you won't be able to cope, and it will have caffeine. That impact. And caffeine, yeah. So that's it. So it's that stress. It's just stressing your body at a cellular level, isn't it? And he would have had some sort of adrenal fatigue going on there as well, for sure. And the stress, it all builds in, doesn't it? And you're compounding the problems by the lifestyle and the sleep, the hormonal release. It all compounds in together, and but it's completely reversible.
Yeah, it's modifiable. It's amazing how just those simple changes he hated the taste of coffee without sugar for a while. But those simple changes can make a huge difference. And it was, a few months ago, he had a sip of someone's coffee with sugar, and he was like, oh, that is so sweet. Yeah, at the time, he didn't notice. So it's completely changeable, and you can make a lot of differences just from small tweaks. So,
yes, and I think, did he have a sugar addiction, would you say?
I think he had a caffeine addiction.
Right.
He still has a lot of coffee now, but for him, it was with that sugar, and that's always what he's had as a child. He's always had tea with a sugar from a very young age, being from a German family. It's just what they did. So he's always had that in his life. And for him, I think it's a comfort. And again, it goes back to food not just being a source of nutrients, but we often had some kind of deep-rooted psychological connection with it. And for him, that sweetness, I think, took him back to his childhood. I couldn't agree more. I think we've all got that connection, haven't we, to our comfort foods. I know my wife Katie, she sort of tea and cake is her go-to comfort food, because I think it just draws those childhood memories, the fun, the really fun ones that we want to kindle, or we want to keep safe and are precious to us, actually. It's interesting. So stimulants were a big part of his life. I think so.
That stimulation, external stimulation, and
that not having, or supposedly not having time to eat, because he's on his feet all day, and his excuse is, I don't have time to eat. Well, you're not making time to eat. It's about priorities. Exactly
right. Yeah, it's always about priorities. We've got the same amount of time. We've got 24 hours in a day, haven't we? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love that story. It's fascinating, and it just shows, doesn't it, that it's about simple choices.
Yeah.
And being consistent. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about it, but what are the problems that people face around nutrition, and what are the big issues that you see when people come to you? What are the themes that you always tend to sort of come to them?
Yeah, I think ownership is a key one, and one we touched on earlier is people come to me expecting me to give them a magic pill. It's not what I do. I work with my clients on a very personal level to understand what makes them tick, what is their motivation. And often people go, oh, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It doesn't work like that. You have to make those changes for the right reason. And so I think that's number one, is kind of ownership, like owning what the issue is and what you can do about it, and recognizing that if you don't put the effort in to change things, then things won't. Someone else can't do it for you. You've got to want to change. So taking my dad as an example, he had to want to change his diet. It would have taken him losing his eyesight to make him change. He got it back, but that was the push that he needed. For some people, it's wanting to start a family. For others, it's they're so tired, they just want to feel like they used to. So ownership is number one. Second is kind of looking at, where are you getting your information from? Are you using reliable sources? Are you just looking on social media, are you scrolling on Instagram? Are you following influencers that maybe are very well-meaning? And any message about healthy eating is a positive one, but sometimes we get really confused. That's sadly where we are at the moment, is that there's so much information out there, good, bad, ugly. And with evidence-based research studies, it varies massively in quality. So one might be a mouse study, and the newspaper might have run with the headline that taking omega-3 fatty acids is useless on mice. But it's looking a bit more into what's the research paper say? What does it mean to you as a layperson? Like, how does that affect you as an individual, your circumstances? So it's about kind of cutting through, like you say, that noise, and really understanding what's going to work for you and what sources you're trusting. So they're the kind of two key areas I think are really important.
Yeah. For me, yes, ownership. I couldn't agree more. Ownership is the fundamental, and I think we're in this strange therapeutic world that we live in nowadays, where ownership isn't a big thing, as we tend to lean more on the therapy side of things, which means we externalize our problems and we look externally to find a solution to an internal problem, which just fundamentally doesn't work. And that's the real frustration of mine, because as soon as you help someone to understand that it's about ownership and it's about them making the choice, and that's the only solution. Coming from the medical profession and working in the NHS, we're part of the problem. The healthcare system is part of the problem. Before I get on my soapbox, because we've medicalized everything. We've created this person in a white coat that gives us all the answers and a little pill to solve our problems. Effectively, we've created a system that wants us to externalize our problems and will help us to treat a symptom. And fundamentally, that is completely broken in my mind, because there's no ownership, there's no incentive to take ownership. Actually, we want a professional to tell us what the problem is, and that's when I say therapeutic environment, that's what I mean, is that kind of medicalization. It's all part of it, and it's all part of like the doctor says X, well, you need to be an expert, not rely on someone else to tell you about your problems. And certainly not, and fundamentally, and I think we do it with lots of things. And as soon as you give away ownership, you give away control, and the results don't tend to come because of that in any area of your life. And health obviously is at the core. Certainly, my belief is at the core of life. We can't have a happy life if we're not healthy. And as soon as you give away the ownership and control, you fundamentally not going to succeed on that journey towards happiness and health. It brings into my mind, and certainly linking to the diabetes that we just talked about, a story that's really pertinent because it only happened recently. So in my clinical practice, I went to a young lad of 12 that had type 1 diabetes, which is obviously a juvenile diabetes and something that wasn't his lifestyle choices that led to that disease manifestation. But as soon as I started speaking to him and his mum, it was clear that they did not have the required level of knowledge around the disease and the disease manifestation and how to manage it well. He was, as a 12-year-old, he was managing it himself without mum's intervention too much. And what he said to me was, I test my blood sugar. If it's high, I give myself at least 5 or 10 or more units of insulin.
Wow.
And that statement in itself, I didn't know where to start with that statement. I looked at mum and she just gave me a blank look and repeated what he'd said as the key messaging around their understanding of how to treat that issue and how to manage that young boy's sugar levels. And I just thought, oh my God, where they've obviously been interacting with all sorts of different healthcare professionals and experts, and their level of knowledge is there. And I was despairing, really. It's probably how I describe my kind of emotional state, because, where do you start?
Yeah, oh gosh, that poor boy and his mum. Yeah, that's quite shocking. And for a 12-year-old to be managing it themselves is a big responsibility. I mean, that's a life and death situation.
Yep.
If he doesn't get it right. And yeah, that's where we need is kind of more grassroots education, especially with something like type 1 diabetes. It needs a lot of careful management, not just with food, but also insulin dosing and the education around that. And it sounds like that young boy didn't have what he needed to be able to manage his condition effectively.
Yeah, and yeah, it runs deeper than that, because obviously he was unwell and had to call they had to call an ambulance, a paramedic to the house, an ambulance, and were taken off to hospital. I mean, he was okay, but underlying that was just that not really understanding how to manage his own sugar levels. And all I could say, apart from sort of despair and try and impart some sort of education to them around being much more sort of diet focused, which they weren't, was that the key message I tried to give them was that they needed to become experts in their condition. Mum and son needed to know more. I said to the young lad he's mad keen on football. I said to him, he needs to know more about his condition than he does about football. But otherwise, he's constantly going to be fighting an uphill battle. And that was kind of the message that I tried to give them. They needed to be an expert in what was going on with them. And that is, I think, fundamentally my message to most people, really. Certainly, if you've got a chronic illness, you need to become an expert in your own condition. And that all comes back to your point about ownership.
Yeah.
I've probably gone on a bit.
And getting the right sources as well, because, say, for example, with something like a thyroid condition, there are lots and lots and lots of blogs about how to manage a thyroid condition without medication. Now, if you have a thyroid that isn't working properly, you need that medication. You can't magic it better with food. So there are some circumstances where people read too much and take too much ownership and cut out lots of things out of their diet because they haven't trusted a reputable source. And I think, again, that's another area that we need to battle with and try and steer some direction with where people can get reliable advice to help manage, serious health conditions. Yeah.
So what would you say to someone around that?
Yeah. So say, for example, if someone's got a thyroid that isn't working properly and they can't make thyroid hormones, they will need medication. That they just need that medication to replace the thyroid hormones that their body can't make. You can't make that better through food. So in that circumstance, I work with lots of other health professionals, so I would write to the doctor and explain what the client's doing, and then just trying to educate them about what foods can support them and what to put into their diet rather than what they should be taking out. and then try and get them to have that open dialogue with their GP. And often that kind of helps the client feel more assured in safer hands, and that they've got knowledge, and knowledge is power. So it makes them feel better as well, that they know what they're doing is going to be putting them on the right path, making them feel better, rather than research, the hell out of something and think they're doing the right thing when really they could be making themselves worse.
Yes. It's your sources, isn't it? Sources of information, and then understanding what the best decision is for you, and not getting caught up in kind of like the sensationalism of the shortcuts, I would say, and not getting lured in to the shortcuts. Yes, but specifically, so if we played out that thyroid issue, what sources, what are your actual tangible, so what sources do you send people? Is it just referring them to a specialist, or do you have generic resources that you like to send people to? So
if I had someone coming to me with that condition,
or more if it was sort of a coffee conversation, or just a chat in a cafe or something, what direction would you lead people in?
I would say speak to your GP. If you've read some research studies that puts you off medication, take those studies to your GP and have an open conversation with them. GPs you're really willing to have those conversations, and people don't think they are. Just like statins, the old statin debate comes up time and time again. You'll find often, there's so many research studies on it. If you have concerns, take them to your GP, talk through the evidence, and they can help you work out what's right for you. And that's the first port of call. And then if they refer you on to a specialist, that specialist will also have the knowledge they need to be able to give you the right advice. And then when it comes to dietary and lifestyle factors, so I'm trained to kind of look at interactions with supplements and medications. So that's where I come into the picture. But I also know when to refer you back to your GP to have those further conversations, especially around things like medication. It's really, really fundamental. People don't try and use their own cures.
Yes. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but what's your view, given the level of nutritional training that a GP might receive?
Yeah.
What's your view on them going back to their GP, or not even coming to you? You pass by, you have a chat with in a coffee shop or something, and what's your view on them taking sort of a conversation to their GP around nutrition?
Nutrition and medication, two totally different things. So around medication, definitely speak to your GP. When it comes to nutrition, look for someone who's regulated. So I'm regulated with someone called BANT, so they have to get a certain amount of CPD, so continuous education points. Look for someone who's got a regulator, basically. So for me, that's BANTs. For other nutritionists, there might be a registered nutritionist or associated registered nutritionist. Make sure they've got some kind of governance around what they do. And by doing that, you'll know you're getting advice from a trusted source, that they'll be up to date with the latest nutrition advice. They will have the latest research. They will have your best interests at heart. And that's kind of a way of making sure you're going to the right source. If you're reading someone's blog who's gone through that personal journey, just remember it's anecdotal. It's not been tested in labs. It's not got any robust evidence behind it, or might not. And treat it like you would reading a paper. Would you follow everything in the paper because it says it's good for you? Probably not. So that's what I would do in terms of nutrition advice. And you're right, GPs do have very limited training. But when it comes to medication, they're absolutely your first port of call. But for nutrition related advice, and seeing a nutritionist on the NHS isn't an option unless you have a condition that requires it. Something like an underactive thyroid wouldn't be one of those conditions. Something like diabetes, or if you have an eating disorder, then yes. But for a lot of other illnesses and diseases, that's not an option. So you would need to pay for that privately, and it's important you look for a source that's regulated and qualified.
Yes, I think that's the key understanding point there is around. Yeah, I think it all comes back to ownership, doesn't it, really? Yeah. It's about sort of taking control of your own path and your own journey, and that's the advice I always give to people is don't be dismissive of GPs and their knowledge and having conversations with them. But I think people are maybe caught up a little bit in that sort of white coat relationship, almost like a teacher-student relationship, and they're afraid to have the conversation because it's a very busy quote-unquote doctor, and they just want to get in and get out. And if there's and I think we've all been there, haven't we? Where we sort of want a kind of clean, quick answer from someone that's a professional, and it's not always that simple. And it's sometimes hard to listen, and especially in that setting, it's hard to listen to and have a conversation with someone. I think that's one of the problems. So actually, just because I think it takes courage to kind of sit down with your GP and discuss something that perhaps you might perceive isn't on top of his priority list of things to do today. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think you've got to take control, and you've got to sit down and you've got to do it. You've got to have the courage to actually do that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, private healthcare isn't accessible to everyone. It very much depends on how much disposable income you have to spend on that, and not everybody does. And that's something that I feel quite strongly about, and it's finding out ways of getting information out to people where it doesn't cost a fortune and people know where to go. It's just working out what that looks like.
Yeah. So okay, let's move forward. So what are the key things well, I asked you before, but I just want to dig into it a little bit more. So the key consistencies around the issues that you see in your clinical practice, or your nutritional practice, what are the key things that come up time and time again around the problems people have?
A lot of the time it's gut issues.
Right.
It's that kind of embarrassing, it gets to the point where it's embarrassing for someone to be in an office if they're kind of passing wind a lot, if it's really smelly, or if they have to make sure they know where the nearest toilet is, or they've just generally got a lot of bloating. So I get a lot of that in my clinic, both men and women, from interestingly quite a few sports people. So through my brother I work a lot of his boxing clients, and they often have a lot of gut issues, and a lot of that's due to intensity of training and not really paying attention to what they're eating. Next is looking at energy. A lot of people come to me with low energy and they just can't figure out why. Sometimes it's quite easy to kind of spot what's going on. Other times it's a bit more complex, and it's working out their genetic mutations. Are they converting the nutrients they need? Are they absorbing what they're eating? And then thirdly, it's kind of weight loss. So looking at weight loss, how can someone lose weight? Often everyone wants to lose weight quickly. It doesn't work like that. So it's changing mindset and working out actually what's going on underneath. So that's kind of going back to the point we talked about earlier, is they may come to you for weight loss, but really what's going on is at a much deeper level, and weight loss is just a symptom, whereas there's something else going on.
Yeah. So so you said loads.
Sorry.
So no, it's good. So narrowing into gut health, which you see a lot. What are the key kind of take homes, and kind of what the key messages around gut health? What is going on when people come to you? I know that there is no one size fits all, and that's probably what you're going to say. But what are the kind of key things that you see again around gut health? What are the problems, and what are the causes of those problems?
So, I mean, I'm not going to say there's not one size that fits all. There's a trend. There's definitely a trend going on. We've used antibiotics far too much over the past couple of decades. That's number one. That's what's happening. There's an increase, rise of people using lots of medication daily just to manage headaches, rather than maybe just drinking a bit more water. So people having more medication. And then kind of people aren't eating as diverse as we used to. So people are sticking to the same things. They're getting the same lunch day in, day out. They're having the same thing for breakfast, same thing for dinner. We're not getting enough diversity in our diets, and we're relying on processed foods too much. All of those things in combination can actually inhibit the good gut bacteria that live in our guts, and then promote the less helpful bacteria to grow. So I'd definitely say there's a trend going on. And when I see people with gut issues, often it's a case of working out their history. What's gone on? How were they born? How many courses of antibiotics have they had? How widely do they eat? Do they get more than 30 different plant-based foods a week? Probably not, if they've got gut issues. Looking at, what medication they're on, what medication they've been on historically, if there's been any contraceptive pills, things like that can all have an influence. And, people don't like talking about it, but how many bowel movements they're having. Are they constipated? That is a key issue around gut health. Mm-hmm. Constipation. If you're constipated, you're not getting rid of your toxins, your hormones are recirculating, you're allowing your stool to sit in your gut, fermenting. It's going to cause gas. It's going to make you feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel heavy. You might make poor food choices because you feel flat, tired, lethargic. Mm-hmm. So they're the key themes around gut health, and a lot of it can be tweaked and changed through some really simple lifestyle changes and getting enough fibre. And we need 30 grams a day. Mm-hmm. Most of us are probably, 90% of us, a study came out recently, aren't getting anywhere near enough. Mm-hmm. So 1 in 5 don't get enough fibre every day.
I think, would you say with the guys and girls that you speak to, when you take that history, is it usually pretty obvious where the sort of ill health of the gut has come from in their history?
Yeah.
Does it jump out at you?
Yeah, and often if there's been a really stressful event as well, that can have a big impact on our gut health. Or if you get your weekend warriors that are hitting it really, really hard at the gym and then hitting it really, really hard in the week at work, their guts are usually obliterated because they are so stressed. They're eating on the go. They're not thinking about eating. They're not chewing. They're just getting by, but they're kind of running on this adrenaline. So usually you're kind of high achievers, your alpha types, if you like. I see a lot of those in clinic that just by getting them to take it a bit slower can really make a difference, and chew their food. Yes,
I think it reminds me of another podcast I was listening to with a guy called Dr. Peter Attia. I don't know if you know him. He's done a lot of sort of blood sugar work. He looks at quite interesting view on that, and he's when pinned down, gun to the head, what's the most important thing around your health? He said it's around rest and sleep is the most important factor, and I think that touches on what you're saying. That you've got to look at your whole lifestyle and how you're stressing your body, and it works both ways, doesn't it? Because we know that the gut, your health of your gut directly influences your hormone levels, how you're feeling, every other aspect of your health. You can't underestimate that. I think we have in the past, actually. I think we've not understood that brain gut link, and that the impact that it has on your whole body holistically. Certainly, I didn't know about that, until recently. I think there's been a sort of lacking in knowledge around that. Probably not if we go back to the ancient times. They probably knew things. We all tend to be cyclical, doesn't it? We forget and we relearn, and we forget and we relearn, we forget and we relearn. We're quite stupid as a species in that regard. And it goes the other way as well. Your whole lifestyle stress will have an impact on your gut health, which is kind of what you're saying.
And also what's really important to remember is our cells all work on a clock, just like we have a night and day cycle. Our gut cells do too. Our gut bacteria do. Every single cell in our body works on a circadian rhythm. And it was a Nobel Prize winner a few years ago that discovered that, and that's had a huge impact on the way we see our bodies and how important it is that we do sleep, and that we don't eat late at night or very late at night. And that's where shift working can come into it as well. If you're shift working, how's that affecting your cell clocks? What's it doing to that, and what's the best thing you can do?
And that's kind of the hormone piece, isn't it? Your circadian rhythm is directly related to the hormone release in your body, and you start messing with that, and then your hormones are all over the place, and that's like a huge impact on your health. I know that firsthand with being a shift worker, and we know around the statistics, longevity of shift workers is very, very poor compared to any other profession. Someone that works nights, their life expectancy is poor. You can't avoid it, and that's simply because of that. You just completely messing up your hormones constantly.
And all the other cells in your body. So your bacteria will do different things at night, or different species will do different things at different times of the day, which is incredible. So if that's getting confused, then you can see how quickly that can have an effect.
Absolutely. God, there's so many kind of different avenues that you go down, don't you, when you look at nutrition and gut health. It's a fascinating area, and can't be overlooked. And so what's your kind of your view on people that come to you and say, I want to go on a quote unquote diet, and I have been on quote unquote diets? What's your view around that, and what are your feelings around diets, and then kind of these labels is what they are, really, isn't it? Kind of labels that people jump to because they want the perceived result that they see on Instagram or something like that. So they suddenly want to know what diet that person's on, and they want to copy that, or what do you see, and what's your personal views around that?
Again, another really good question. So if someone comes to me and saying, I want to go on a paleo diet, I'll go, okay, fine. Why do you want to do that? My job isn't to tell people what diets to do. I don't agree with diets personally, but if someone comes to me and they really, really want to do it, or they want to go vegan, that's a really good example. I've had lots lately. I want to go vegan. Veganism is a change in your diet. It is a vegan diet. First of all, what's your motivation? Why do you want to do it? And then kind of, once we've worked through that, and if they still want to do it, okay, how can you do it safely? How can you do it in a way that's going to be sustainable and it's going to be a long-term change? But in terms of actual diets or diets for weight loss, I don't agree with them. I think they can often cause problems. We know diets over sustained periods of time, especially when started young, can increase the risk of eating disorders developing. And that's something that we really need to pay attention to, because there are a lot of eating disorders that are undiagnosed and often start from this yo-yo dieting at a young age, or seeing a mother do it, or seeing a father do it, or being around that culture of dieting. So I try to get my clients to work out what their goal is, what it means to them, and then how to achieve it. And how to achieve it isn't through quick fixes. So, when someone comes to see me, it's not, I'm going to tell you what to do and off you go. It's okay, fine, you need to lose X amount of weight because you might be obese, you might be trying to conceive. We then look at, how do you get there sustainably in a way that's not going to result in you, what people tend to refer as falling off the wagon. There is no falling off the wagon. You need to be able to be flexible with your food. Going out for dinner, eat and enjoy what you're eating, but don't then kind of try and work it off the next day or feel bad about it and starve and restrict the next. So for me, it's about understanding goals, trying to get rid of this diet culture that we seem to be living in, and trying to work with people to make sustainable changes to the way they eat rather than diet. I hate the word diet just because it has such negative connotations, and you're much less likely to stick to something if you perceive it as being a diet. I look at what you can add in, what swaps you can make, rather than what we can take out and what you're restricting, because that doesn't help.
Yes. Yeah, I feel pretty much exactly the same. I hate the labeling and the whole diet system, going on diets, and the just the mindset behind it is what irritates me more than anything else. And because like you say, it's about health, it's about longevity, and those messages just seem to get lost when people want to jump on a diet bandwagon, but it becomes so attractive, doesn't it? I can see the dichotomy in people's sort of faces almost when I speak to them about these topics, because you want the result and you end up wanting the result quite badly, and then you in your mind you make such a strong connection between the result and the paleo diet, and then you reinforce that because that's how our brains work. We reinforce that, and then that becomes the kind of path that you want to take, and then falling off that becomes a massive issue, and you beat yourself up about it, and then you want to find another solution, so then you attach yourself to another solution, and this is just this cycle, isn't it, of kind of like looking for the we want to belong, don't we? We want those labels. We want to attach ourselves to a solution that's going to work every single time. Bang, bang, bang. And it's hard to shift from that mindset to one of, right, actually what's going to be healthy for me for the next 60 years, and what are the right choices, and what's not health in the kind of like the clinical sense, but what's actually going to allow me to live a healthier, happier life as well. It's tough. Yeah.
And that's where that education piece comes into it. So often for me, it's getting clients in and kind of explaining to them, actually, bread isn't bad for you if you have it in moderation, if you're not celiac, if you don't have an issue with it, or a condition that means that gluten could be problematic. It's re-educating people to understand what foods can support health and what foods might hinder it. So, processed foods, obviously there's, if you can cook from scratch, great. But if you're relying on a processed food, how can you make it more nutritious? So if you're buying a shop-bought soup, could you add half a tin of lentils in it to increase the fibre, increase the protein? So it's simple things like that, and it's that educational piece about how to make a meal as well. A lot of people are so confused with what a meal should look like or compose of. It's going back to basics.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, it's everyone wants the advanced. There's an expression that a guy I interviewed last week was saying that everyone wants the advanced tactics, but doing the simple things well is the advanced tactics. Do you know what I mean? It's basics done well, and that always makes me think back to soldiering. A good soldier is one that does the basics very, very, very well, and that is it. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, yes, it's all the fundamentals really, and that's kind of that's why I try and bring people like yourself on the podcast, because it's kind of, I don't think you can reinforce that message enough, because there's what I call noise, so much noise in this space around people trying to give you that one size fits all or one single silver bullet solution. But yeah, I mean, it's I mean, you could talk about it forever, couldn't you? The whole diet culture. So, but I can just pay you as a professional, and you'll give me a pill, and I'll lose loads of weight.
Yeah, if only. I'd be very rich.
Well, I mean, even if that was a solution, I don't think it would lead to a happy life. To be honest with you, I don't think it would. I think we're all on a journey, aren't we? We're all on the hero's journey, and we've got to find our own path, and the struggle is part of it. And that's what I think. When people are looking for these quick solutions, they overlook that kind of struggle and coming of age and maturity in their life to actually make the appropriate choices. And I think a lot of people just spend their whole life just looking for those quick fixes, and it's almost a life lost, because you're better off embracing the struggle and finding a path through it, because that is life in essence. I don't want to get too ethereal.
I completely agree with you on that. It's you could go on for hours, but
yes. Okay, so we know that if we're eating whole food, which I know lots of people are not eating, and there's a problem with sort of processed food, but if we look at whole food and plant-based food and we know that we're getting less nutrients now than we did 50 years ago, right? So what can we do?
Looking at what you're eating over the course of the day, so try and aim for half your plate to be plant-based. Mm-hmm. So get your dark leafy greens in there, get lots of different colours. Really focus on eating a rainbow across the course of the week. Now, I don't like people to focus on days or meals, but look over the course of the week, gives you some perspective. So can you aim for 30 different plant-based foods over the course of the week? It's what I get my clients to do. The more colourful, the better. The reason why that's important is that we know that the more colourful plant-based foods we get, the more range of nutrients we're able to absorb. So, different plant compounds contain different things. Mm-hmm. So lipocene found in cooked tomatoes, you can't then find that in red cabbage. You'll get something else. So looking at variety, really, really crucial. Not only is that good for your gut health, but it's good for your overall health as well. And then kind of looking at, what else you can do. Are you drinking enough? Make sure you have enough water throughout the course of the day. Like really small steps to try and make a big difference can make you feel so much better. If you're getting headaches all the time, it could be as simple as dehydration. Just 2 to 3% shrinkage in hydration can really make you feel pretty rubbish.
Yeah. So, and if I don't hit 30 different fruit and veg, I'm to give up and go to McDonald's.
No, aim. So it's about having an end goal. I mean, we're humans. We like to have targets.
Yeah.
So if you can aim and reach towards that, then that's a good start. So if you hit 20, fab. But what can you do for the next week?
And I think that I'm saying that tongue in cheek to elicit response. But I think the point, which you touched on a couple of times, is don't beat yourself up about missing targets or having a quote unquote unhealthy meal or going out and indulging. That's a huge part of it. Is not. It's not getting in that cycle of like falling off the wagon, which is what you said, falling off the wagon, getting back on, falling off, getting back on,
Yeah, it's about being flexible. And that's what I get my clients to learn. And once they start to learn that for themselves, that ownership piece, they can then make much better decisions about the foods they're eating and really enjoy the foods that they want to eat rather than foods they feel they have to eat for health.
Yeah, and it does come back to ownership. I know we said it over and over again, it's empowerment, isn't it? It's empowering yourself to do that, and that's in itself, that's rewarding, being empowered. But I think it's interesting what you touched on about people not really cooking and not really understanding how to cook and what to cook. So do you see that a lot, and do you think that's
an awful lot actually? And that's probably me about 8 years ago, living in London, thinking I knew how to cook, but really it was just getting a ready meal and adding a side salad to it. And it's that kind of going back to basics, so it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need recipe books. Find your protein source, plant-based or otherwise. Then, look at filling up half your plate with vegetables. So cook them, roast them, steam them, whatever you want with them. Get that half a plate. And then looking at, okay, where's my carbs coming from? Is that from root veg? Is that from whole grains? Quarter your plate being made up of that. So it's not about knowing how to cook, it's more about how to put things together. So it's really easy with the internet these days just to look at kind of how to steam vegetables. Like everyone can do it. Or frozen food shouldn't be given a bad rep. If you want to buy a packet of frozen ratatouille and you have that with some pasta and you put some chicken in with it, that's a complete meal. That's a good balance. And it's starting somewhere. Or looking at recipe boxes and is that a way that you get into cooking? Finding out what works for you.
Yes, taking an interest in your own health, really, isn't it? And sort of diving into that. I think that is what I like, I guess, about the plant movement and kind of the plant-based movement, the vegan movement, is the emphasis is on eating more vegetables, which I guess is a massive positive driver for people to actually change their health and take control. And so,
Yeah, and with that comes with its own pitfalls as well. It's also knowing with plant-based foods what proteins to eat and educating yourself. Again, taking ownership. Okay, if you're going to go on a vegan diet, provide yourself with the knowledge about how to pair proteins, how to make sure you're getting enough from plants. If you don't do that, you can become blindsided to the fact that you need to pay attention to that, or you're not going to get the benefits of having a whole-rounded diet.
Yeah, I know from personal experience, sort of going like 100% plant-based. I'm not now, but I'm going for a short period. Going 100% plant-based is the kind of calorific value. Someone who needs kind of 3,000 calories to stand up for a day, and walk to the shops. I think. If you're going 100% plant-based, you've got to understand the volume of food that you need to eat, and that's something that I was overlooking, and I was sort of malnourishing myself through not understanding, the volume of food that I had to eat on a plant-based diet compared to a sort of more omnivorous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite surprising actually, and people often get that confused. And yeah, again, that's where I often see people in my clinic, is when they've tried something, they've not felt amazing from it, and they're wondering why.
Yeah, it's about the fact diving into the details, isn't it? Where do you stand on a kind of supplement aspect? Whether it be protein or other supplements, what's your kind of standing on that?
A really, really interesting question. There are a lot of good ones about, well formulated. Again, not for everyone, but there are also some really bad ones about. I say bad, and it's in kind of, not great fillers, or they have kind of minimal amounts to have any kind of therapeutic benefit. I don't suggest supplements as a first port of call. My view is always food first. Mm-hmm. But if someone is really struggling to get enough protein in their day, or they have an increased demand for protein, so they might be training for an event, then protein powder absolutely can have a time and a place. Again, it's looking at the quality of that protein powder. What's it filled with? What sweeteners are in it, if any? And is it the right one for that person? How much? What time? When should it be having it? And then you've got the other side of things, so omega-3 fatty acids. They can be really beneficial for health. If you're vegan, for example, you're not getting enough through diet, it's impossible, then a supplement is needed. And then you've got things that are actually prescribed on the NHS, like vitamin D3. Again, we should all be thinking about taking it October till March. So that absolutely has a time in our diets for supplementation. But, should everybody be taking supplements? No, I don't think so. It really depends on what you're doing, what your goal is, your level of activity, and what you're eating. Yeah,
I think it all comes back to that kind of silver bullet approach, isn't it? There isn't one, and you need to eat whole foods, real foods. I did have a question on that, but it slipped my mind, so let's move on. So the question I always ask all my guests is, what's your definition of health?
Very good question. My definition of health would be feeling the best you can be, and feeling happy within yourself, within your body, and happy with the food that you're eating as well. Life is way too short, and we need to be able to enjoy it, and that for me is health.
Yep. And if there are some are there any tools or techniques that sort of always come up in your practice that you try and advise people to use or do?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to ownership again, I know I mentioned that word far too many times.
I don't think you can.
Keeping a food diary can be really helpful for people to kind of take ownership over what they are actually eating, and then that can be helpful for them to understand, oh, okay, fine, then there's biscuits that snuck in the afternoon every afternoon might be causing some kind of weight contribution. Or if someone's kind of just casually drinking Coca-Cola throughout the day, they're not really kind of paying attention to it, that can also be kind of underlying other issues. It's getting that ownership piece on, so kind of getting people to take a food diary. So that's not what you're eating, it's taking a snapshot about what's going on over the course of your day, over the course of your week, even if it's photographs that I get sent at the end of the week, or writing it down. Next is kind of think about mindful eating. Now that doesn't have to mean half an hour meditation process. It can be as simple as sitting down to eat, taking 3 deep breaths before you eat, and really filling up your lungs. So I'm sure if both of us took a breath in now, we're probably only breathing in the top half, not the full half of our lungs. So doing that can take us from that go mode to rest and digest. So there are the 2 things that I use pretty much with every client that I see, to just get them to understand a bit more about what's going on, and also to help them be in the best position to be able to absorb and digest their food.
That's really, really powerful advice, actually, I think, because it's simple, isn't it? It's simple, everyone can do it, and it takes minutes,
and it's free.
Yeah, it's free.
Breathing is free, and taking a food diary is free, but it can often be really helpful.
You're not the first guest that's mentioned breathing, for sure. It's an incredibly powerful tool to our health. It really is a doorway to so much, for sure. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you think is pertinent to this sort of conversation around nutrients and health?
I think we've covered an awful lot, and the only thing I would say is kind of be really careful about where you get your information from, but be open-minded as well. So don't just believe the first thing you read, even if it's from a credible source. Challenge yourself, challenge your thoughts. And we get a much broader understanding if we're able to take in other views. So do read around. Don't kind of have a narrow perspective on things. And try to get as much education as you can and take ownership of your learning. Yeah,
I think that's really powerful, because I think we as professionals, we fall into a trap because I'm speaking from my own experience, we understand research, we understand how research is put together and it becomes a muscle, a skill that we've got as professionals. So we look at research, and very quickly we can dismiss pretty much everything we read in the papers or a magazine around nutrition, because we can look at the research and we can understand that it's pure conjecture, like a lot of it is, or it's valid because of our understanding of how research is put together. But I guess we overlook the fact that we've built a muscle there, and perhaps there's a large proportion of the population that hasn't, and they don't necessarily understand how research works and how it can be biased, or can just be completely anecdotal, or can just be complete conjecture of someone who's written an article based on the last 10 days of their life. And I think it's quite, I don't know how you feel, but I think it's quite easy for us to overlook as sort of pros.
Yeah, even as professionals, it can be quite easy to kind of dismiss certain studies because you don't want to know about it. And that's something we always have to challenge ourselves and be open and kind of actually, do you know what, I'm going to give this person, this article, the time of day, because I should broaden my understanding and appreciate all views. Yeah,
I think that's. I know personally. I know I've done that. You know, you don't want to get sort of blindsided or told you're wrong, really, do you? And it's about getting through the ego and being like, no. I need to have a very open mind. And the other point that you made, which I think is really good, is just sort of sitting down and sort of sitting with your thoughts and understanding at a deeper level what you think is correct, because I think the science and the research is great, and you really need to sort of understand what you're doing and what you're putting into your body. You know, the expression I always use is food is information. You're putting information into your body with every piece of food that you take, and if you think, what is this information giving my body, then you'll start to open your eyes to the benefits or the negative aspects of that information that you're putting in. You know, if you're putting really crap information in, then you can't help but the output be poor. And I think that's a powerful analogy. But if we should fundamentally understand at a very simple level what healthy is in terms of food, and sometimes we get caught up in a bit of a whirlwind that leads to poor choices. But if we sit for a little while and just sort of think about what our body needs and listen to our body, we can get the answers that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that food being information, I love that. And it's not just information at a nutrient level, but if you're having an ice cream on the beach, that's giving you information, but mentally it's pleasure. And that's what we mustn't lose sight of, is, you know, we should be enjoying what we're eating. I'm not saying that's carte blanche, go and have ice cream by the seaside all day long, but, you know, if it's, you know, once a week or whatever, and you enjoy that again is nourishing your body from a mental level as well as a physiological.
Of course, and start with the end in mind. You know, if the result is health and happiness, then that should be the path that you're on. You know, it's not about getting ripped abs and sort of losing weight, quote unquote. You know, absolutely. Kristy, so much awesome information in the content of what we've got here. I just want to acknowledge you and your sort of work, and you know, thank you very much for coming on. What are you up to at the moment, and how can people find out more about what you're doing and get in touch with you and sort of interact with you?
Yeah, so I run a private clinic for one-to-one consultations down in South London at Peckham Levels, which is a multi-storey car park, which is great inside. It's a really fab space, actually. There's lots of interesting projects and people. It's brilliant. At Level 6, that's a lovely yoga studio. I also run Skype consultations or Zoom, and I do a lot of workplace wellness and corporate media speaking opportunities. So you'll see me at lots of different events. I've got a retreat coming up in October as well down in Somerset. So yeah, lots of different ways I'm trying to reach out to people, and kind of through the events is a great way to kind of get more education out there. Yeah,
and I think hopefully we can collaborate on some events and get you back on and do some deeper dives. I can think of probably half a dozen things that I can ask you about in this space that we haven't talked about today, but for sure. Excellent. And what's social media, website, what's the best way to
usually through Instagram. I do a lot of work through that, just get a lot of interaction, which I love, through my clients and other people. So yes, it's Kristy Coleman Nutrition. Website is kcnutrition.co.uk.
KC Nutrition.
It's in the letters. Original name.
Yeah, no, I like it. Keep it simple. And I've followed your Instagram closely, and you do some amazing posts around food and ingredients and what people can, give people ideas and bits and pieces, and it looks beautiful as well. It really does.
Thank you. I'm not artistic in any way, shape or form.
I think you might be. Awesome. We're going to leave it there. So thank you very much, Kristy, and I will hopefully get you back on the podcast soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
So there we have it, Kristy Coleman, nutrition special for you guys. Hope you got as much out of it as I did. Thrilled to record that show and engage with Kristy and on all the good work that she's doing in London. Please jump across and follow her, Kristy Coleman Nutrition. And episode 6 done and dusted. Guys, we've got another one lined up, and another one, and another one. We're coming to you every single week with 2 episodes. I've actually loaded these front 5 in the first week and a half, so it's all good, and we've got so much great content coming your way. Please stay engaged, subscribe, follow me at The Knock, that's the NOQ on Instagram and Facebook as well. Let us know what you think. Subscribe, give us your feedback, let us know who you want us to get on here. If you've got any questions that you want me or any of my guests to tackle, then jump in, DM me, PM me, whatever you want to do. Hit me up on social, and I will look forward to speaking to you very, very soon. Take care.